one realizes that suffering doesn't come from what happens, but from how we interpret it. If today you are in pain, there is something you must understand immediately. Suffering is not caused by events, but by the way your mind processes them. Two people can experience the exact same situation. One falls into despair, while the other uses it as a stepping stone to grow. What makes the difference? Perception. Carl Jung explained it clearly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This means that many times we do not suffer because of what happens, but because of the unconscious meanings we attach to every situation. What hurts you the most is not reality itself, but the story you tell yourself about it. Your mind holds an invisible power, shaping the way you experience the world. The question is, are you using this power to create peace or suffering? Think about this. If someone rejects you, there are two ways to see it. One way is to interpret it as, this means I am not good enough, that I will never be loved, that I will always be abandoned. The other way is, this simply means this person was not meant for me, and now I have space for someone who will truly value me. Do you see the difference? The exact same event, two completely opposite interpretations. One leads to suffering, the other to liberation. The way you interpret reality defines how much pain you will feel. But here's the real issue. Most people interpret their experiences through the lens of their deepest wounds. If you carry unresolved abandonment, you will see rejection everywhere. If you struggle with insecurity, you will perceive attacks where there are none. Your perception is distorted by what remains unhealed within you. You do not suffer because of what happens. You suffer because of what it means to you. Imagine losing your job. One person might see it as the end of the world. Another might see it as an opportunity for something better. The difference is not in the event itself, but in the interpretation of it. When you believe that everything is a tragedy, your life becomes a series of endless misfortunes. But when you believe that everything carries a lesson, your life transforms into a journey of constant growth. How do you start changing the way you interpret reality? Every time something causes you pain, ask yourself, what story am I telling myself about this? Is it really as bad as I think? Am I exaggerating the impact of this situation? Can I view this experience from another perspective? Find the lesson hidden within the pain. Jung said that what hurts us the most is often what we need to learn the most. If something is making you suffer, ask yourself, what is this experience teaching me about myself? Develop the ability of cognitive restructuring. Every time you interpret something negatively, force your mind to search for a new perspective. Instead of thinking, this is the worst thing that could have happened, try saying, this is exactly what I needed to wake up. Stop taking everything personally. Most suffering comes from taking things too seriously. Not everything is an attack. Not everything is a rejection. Not everything is a sign that you are not enough. Break the habit of demanding immediate meaning from everything. Many times, suffering is just resistance to the unknown. We want to understand why something happened right away, and in our obsession to find answers, we drain ourselves. Some things only make sense when you look back. Practice external observation. Imagine that your life is a movie, and you are just watching the story unfold, detached from emotions. When you separate yourself from suffering and observe it from a distance, you realize that everything is temporary, and that in the end, you decide how much weight to give each situation. The moment suffering stops controlling you is the moment you begin to apply this shift in perspective, something powerful happens. You stop being a victim of your own mind. You no longer take criticism to heart. You no longer feel like every loss is the end of the world. You begin to see challenges as opportunities rather than punishments. And here is the key. When you understand that suffering is a mental construct, you gain the ability to break free from it. But there's more. The deepest root of suffering is attachment to things, to people, to expectations. And in the next step, I will show you how to break free from this attachment so that you will never again be a prisoner of pain. The second step, break free from attachment to what you cannot control. If there is one thing that keeps people trapped in suffering, it is their need to control the uncontrollable. You want others to act as you expect them to. You want things to unfold exactly as you planned. You want life to align perfectly with your expectations. But here is the raw truth. Life owes you nothing. The sooner you accept this, the sooner you will free yourself from suffering. Carl Jung spoke about how attachment is the root of human suffering. We cling to people, situations, and ideas, and when reality does not align with our desires, we feel pain. But this pain does not come from life itself. It comes from our resistance to accepting it as it is. The first truth is this: the more you try to control, the more you suffer. Look at your own life. How many times have you tried to change someone, only to be frustrated because they remained the same? How many times have you made a plan, and when things didn't go as expected, you were consumed by anxiety? Suffering does not come from the event itself. It comes from your struggle against what is. People do not change because you want them to. They change when they decide to. Things don't always go according to plan, but that doesn't mean they can't turn out even better. Uncertainty is a natural part of life. The more you resist it, the more it will hurt. Accept that you do not have control over everything. Life is unpredictable. No matter how much you plan, there will always be things beyond your control. Instead of resisting, learn to flow with whatever comes your way. Identify what you can control. You cannot control other people, but you can control how you respond to them. You cannot control every situation, but you can control how you interpret it. Invest your energy in what depends on you, and let go of what doesn't. Learn to let go without fear. Many times, we hold on to things because we believe we need them to be happy. But true happiness does not depend on anything external. When you learn to be at peace without clinging to anything, you become unshakable. Stop living in expectations and start living in acceptance. Rigid expectations create frustration. Instead of expecting things to happen in a certain way, accept what comes and adapt. This does not mean giving up. It means trusting that everything is unfolding as it should. When you stop forcing life, it flows more naturally. Understand that everything is temporary. What hurts you today will be a memory tomorrow. What seems impossible now may not even matter in a few months. Suffering thrives on the illusion of permanence, but nothing in life is eternal. Here's a powerful exercise. Make a list of everything that worries you right now. Then, divide it into 2 columns: what you can control and what you cannot. You will realize that most of your worries fall into the second column. Now, commit to letting go of what you cannot change. When you release control, something powerful happens. Your anxiety decreases. You no longer waste energy worrying about things that are beyond your reach. You feel lighter because the weight of frustration disappears. You are no longer fighting against reality. And surprisingly, things start to fall into place naturally because instead of forcing, you allow life to flow. Try this 1-week challenge. Every time something doesn't go as planned, instead of resisting, say out loud, "This is what it is. I accept it and move forward." Whenever you feel the urge to control someone, remind yourself that each person has their own journey. Focus on yours. Make a list of the things you're clinging to and ask yourself, what would happen if I simply let them go? Each night, reflect. How free was I today from the need to control? As you practice this, you will notice that life becomes much lighter, not because everything is perfect, but because you have finally stopped fighting against the inevitable. But here's something even deeper. Letting go of external attachments is not enough. You must also learn to manage what happens inside you. Because if you do not master your emotions, you will continue to suffer no matter how much you try to control everything else. And that is what we will discuss next. How to master your emotions instead of letting them control you. Suffering does not only come from external events, but from how you handle what happens within you. Your emotions can be your greatest ally or your worst enemy. If you do not learn to control them, they will control you. They will make you react impulsively and keep you trapped in cycles of pain. But if you master them, you will become unbreakable. Carl Jung spoke about the shadow, that hidden part of yourself that you repress because society taught you it was unacceptable. But when you ignore your shadow, it doesn't disappear. It becomes your jailer. It controls you from the depths of your unconscious, making you react with uncontrollable anger, paralyzing fear, or deep sadness. However, when you integrate it and understand it, you stop being a victim of your own emotions. You realize that you are not your emotions. You are the one who observes them. Imagine being in the middle of a stormy sea. The waves represent your emotions. If you let yourself be carried away, you will drown. But if you learn to surf, you will move with them without being overwhelmed. That is the power of emotional mastery. Anxiety is not the problem. The problem is your resistance to feeling it. Fear is not the enemy. Your interpretation of it is. Sadness is not the end. It is a signal that something in your life needs attention. To stop being a slave to your emotions, the first step is to observe them without identifying with them. When you feel anxiety, fear, or anger, don't react immediately. Instead, pause and observe. Tell yourself, I am feeling this, but I am not this. The moment you separate yourself from the emotion, you take back control. Instead of being carried away by the emotional storm, ask yourself questions. Where is this emotion really coming from? Is it as serious as it seems? What would happen if I didn't react immediately? Your brain is programmed to react based on past experiences, but the truth is that most emotions are not caused by what is happening now, but by what the situation reminds you of from your past. Change your internal dialogue. The words you use to talk to yourself shape the intensity of what you feel. Instead of saying, I can't handle this, tell yourself, this is temporary, and I can manage it. The way you frame your experiences defines your suffering. Find the root of your emotions instead of just treating the symptoms. If something repeatedly causes you pain, the problem is not the situation itself, but what it represents to you. Jung said that true growth happens when we confront what we avoid. Ask yourself, what past wound is being triggered by this emotion? Often, what hurts us in the present is a reflection of something unresolved in the past. Learn to use conscious breathing to take control of your emotions. You cannot think clearly if your body is in survival mode. Before reacting, take a deep breath. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, and exhale for 6. This sends a signal to your brain that there is no real danger, helping you regain clarity. Another powerful technique is writing down your emotions before reacting. Instead of acting impulsively, write down what you're feeling. Sometimes, when we see our emotions on paper, we realize they are not as overwhelming as they seemed in our minds. Emotions are energy in motion, and if you don't channel them, they get trapped inside you, turning into suffering. If you feel anger, use it to exercise. If you feel anxiety, take a walk. If you feel sadness, write or create something. Don't let your emotions accumulate without direction. If you truly want to master your emotions, try this for 1 week. Every time you feel a strong emotion, write down what triggered it, how you reacted, and how you could have responded differently. Before reacting to someone, count to 10 and breathe deeply. If after that, you still feel the same way, then decide how to act. When a negative emotion arises, name it. This is fear. This is frustration. This is anger. Naming your emotions reduces their power over you. Practicing daily gratitude also helps shift your focus away from suffering. Even in difficult moments, acknowledging something positive rewires your brain to see beyond the immediate pain. When you learn to manage your emotions instead of letting them control you, people lose the power to manipulate you. Problems no longer overwhelm you in the same way. Your mind becomes clearer, and your decisions become more strategic. You experience peace even in the midst of chaos. But there is something even more powerful than mastering your emotions. You must also stop seeing yourself as a victim of the world. Suffering persists when you cling to the belief that life owes you something, that the world is unfair to you, or that circumstances are against you. This mindset keeps you trapped in a prison of your own making, preventing you from moving forward. And that is exactly what we will explore next: how to break free from the victim identity and take full control of your life. Carl Jung spoke about the importance of personal responsibility. The moment you stop blaming others and take control of your life is the moment you truly begin to free yourself from suffering. There is something many people don't want to hear. No one is coming to save you. And while this may sound harsh at first, it is actually a blessing. Because the moment you understand that the power lies within you, you stop depending on external factors to change your life. You no longer need someone else to rescue you, because you can become the person you've been looking for. Fact number 1. No one is coming to save you, and that is a blessing. Waiting for someone to rescue you, for fate to change in your favor, or for things to magically fall into place, is an illusion that only prolongs your suffering. It's not that the world is against you, but as long as you wait for something external to change in order to feel better, you will remain trapped in frustration. The key is to understand that no one is obligated to give you happiness except yourself. The victim mentality is fueled by 3 main beliefs. I have no control over my life. This belief makes you think your destiny is in the hands of others, or mere luck. The world is unfair to me. This thought convinces you that life owes you something, and that you are stuck in a never-ending streak of bad luck. I need others to recognize or help me. Depending on external approval to feel valuable or to move forward keeps you powerless. But if you look at people who have transformed their lives, they all share one thing in common. At some point, they stopped waiting and started acting. They didn't cling to the idea that the world owed them something. Instead, they took control and became the protagonists of their own story. How to break the victim identity. Change your internal narrative. Pay attention to how you talk about your life. Do you say things like, "This always happens to me," "I never have any luck," or "People always let me down"? These statements reinforce the idea that you have no power. Change your dialogue to, "I choose how to respond to this. I have the ability to change my situation. My past does not define my future." The way you describe your reality determines how you experience it. Identify where you feel powerless. Ask yourself, in what areas of my life do I feel stuck? What situations do I keep repeating? What do I constantly complain about? The answers to these questions will show you where you have adopted the victim role. Take responsibility for what you can control. You can't control others, but you can control how you respond. You can't change the past, but you can decide what to do with it. You can't prevent every obstacle, but you can decide whether you define yourself by your struggles or by how you overcome them. The key is to take ownership of your life instead of waiting for someone else to fix it for you. Challenge your need for external validation. Many times, we suffer because we expect recognition or fairness from others. But the world is not always fair. Instead of waiting for others to validate your pain or efforts, focus on what you can do for yourself. When you stop depending on external approval, you become truly free. Take immediate action, no matter how small. The first step to breaking free from the victim mentality is proving to yourself that you have control. It could be something small, changing a routine, learning something new, making a decision you've been avoiding. The important thing is to act. Stop looking for excuses and start looking for solutions. Every time you feel like something is holding you back, ask yourself, is this really an insurmountable obstacle? Or is it just an excuse preventing me from moving forward? More often than not, the problem is not the situation itself, but the story we tell ourselves about it. Practical exercise to break the victim mindset. For 1 week, do this. Write down 3 areas where you feel like a victim. Write down how you could take control in each situation. Act on at least one of them. It doesn't have to be something big. The key is to prove to yourself that you have the power to change it. The result of taking control of your life. When you stop seeing yourself as a victim and take responsibility for your destiny, you feel more empowered and at peace. Your relationships improve because you no longer depend on others for your happiness. You face challenges with greater resilience. Suffering decreases because you focus on solutions instead of complaints. But there is something even more powerful. When you find a purpose greater than your pain, suffering stops consuming your life. Find a purpose greater than your pain. Suffering is inevitable in life, but there is a reason why some people seem to endure it with more strength than others. They have a purpose that gives meaning to everything. When you lack a clear purpose, any obstacle feels unbearable. But when you find something that transcends your pain, suffering stops being a punishment and becomes a teacher. Carl Jung spoke of self-realization as the process of integrating all aspects of our being. According to him, suffering is not something to be avoided at all costs, but rather a signal that there is something within us that needs to be understood, worked through, and transformed. The goal is not to eliminate pain from life, but to use it as fuel to become stronger and wiser. Think about someone you admire. for their strength. Most resilient individuals have gone through difficult times, yet instead of letting suffering define them, they used it as a catalyst for growth. They found something that gave them a reason to keep moving forward, something that allowed them to find meaning in their experiences. This does not mean that you should romanticize suffering or seek it out intentionally, but rather understand that behind every challenge there is an opportunity for growth. If pain seems overwhelming, ask yourself key questions. How can I use this suffering to learn something about myself? In what areas of my life is this pain pushing me to grow? How can I transform this experience into something that helps others? When you find a purpose greater than your pain, suffering stops being a sentence and becomes a challenge. You stop seeing yourself as a victim and start recognizing yourself as someone with the power to transform their own life. Jung spoke of the process of individuation, which is about becoming the person you are truly meant to be. A crucial part of this journey is discovering a purpose that gives meaning to your existence. To achieve this, identify what ignites your passion and ask yourself what activities make you lose track of time and when you feel most alive. The key lies in what energizes you, rather than drains you. Many times, our purpose is connected to our wounds. Those who have suffered abandonment may find meaning in helping others heal. Those who have overcome extreme difficulties can inspire people going through similar struggles. You don't need to have everything figured out from the start. The important thing is to take action. If something calls to you, explore it, read about it, practice it, and get involved step by step. Surround yourself with people who inspire you. If you want to find your purpose, avoid those who focus only on complaining and suffering. Seek out people who have already found meaning in their lives and learn from them. Accept that purpose evolves. What drives you today may not be the same in the future. Be flexible and allow your purpose to transform over time. Jung believed that the true meaning of life is not found in avoiding pain, but in finding a reason strong enough to endure it. Self-realization is not a fixed destination, but a lifelong journey of continuous evolution. When you find something greater than your suffering, you stop seeing pain as a punishment and start perceiving it as an opportunity for transformation. You develop resilience because you understand that every challenge serves a purpose. You feel more connected to life because you are no longer trapped in the role of a victim. Purpose is what turns suffering into wisdom and adversity into growth. When you finally discover it, you realize that you have not only moved beyond suffering, you have truly begun to live. Suffering is an inevitable part of life, but it does not have to define you. Every wound, every obstacle, and every painful moment is actually a doorway to your evolution. The goal is not to avoid suffering at all costs, but to learn how to see it through a different lens. The people who have transcended pain did not do so because they never suffered, but because they found something greater than their suffering. They discovered a purpose, learned to reinterpret their story, and took control of their lives instead of remaining trapped in the role of victims. Jung taught us that self-realization is the process of integrating all aspects of ourselves, including our pain. There is no light without shadow, no growth without challenge, and in that integration lies our true power. If today you feel that suffering is consuming you, remember this: you are not alone, and you are not trapped. Your story does not end here. Use your pain as a compass, as fuel to discover who you truly are and what you came to do in this world. In the end, the real question is not why is this happening to me, but rather, how can I use this to become the best version of myself? And when you find the answer, pain ceases to be a burden and instead becomes your greatest teacher. If you found this message valuable, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate the notification bell, and share this video with others who might need to hear this. Let's continue growing together. In the next few minutes, you are going to discover why the most awakened and accomplished human beings on this planet have all passed through moments where everything seemed lost, and how they used precisely those dark nights of the soul to build lives that went far beyond anything they could have imagined. If at this very moment you feel like you can't go on, if you've reached a point where every door seems to have closed and the path ahead looks like a void, then this is the message your unconscious has been waiting to hear. Because what you are experiencing is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of your most powerful transformation. Did you know that almost every person who achieved extraordinary growth in their life once reached a point of complete inner collapse, a moment when their old self could no longer survive? But here lies the crucial difference. While most give up at that threshold, the few who transcend it discovered a secret that changes everything. And that secret is what you are about to uncover, step by step, in a way that is practical and profoundly personal, regardless of your age, your past, or your current circumstances. My name is Carl Jung, and through decades of observing the human psyche, I have witnessed transformations that defy reason. I have seen the death and rebirth of souls who believed all meaning was gone. And let me tell you something with absolute certainty. If you are hearing this message right now, it is because your story is not ending. It is being rewritten by your deepest self. There was a time in my life when I, too, found myself at the edge of despair, when all external forms of meaning collapsed and I faced the abyss of my own unconscious. I remember sitting in complete solitude, watching life pass me by, and wondering if perhaps I had failed at existing. But in that silent agony, I discovered something that changed everything. I realized I had been waiting for the outer world to change so that I could finally feel whole inside. I had been waiting for the right moment, the ideal conditions, the golden opportunity. Yet the truth is that the perfect moment arrives exactly when everything seems lost, because that is when the ego finally breaks, and the soul, no longer imprisoned by illusion, begins to awaken. Imagine this through a metaphor. Picture yourself at the bottom of a deep well. From that depth, the only possible direction is upward. Yet most people, when they reach that bottom, obsess over how dark or deep it is instead of looking for the first stone to climb. They fixate on the problem rather than the ascent. And here lies the first sacred key I want you to understand. Your current situation is not your final destiny. It is only your point of initiation. Have you ever wondered why some people rise again after devastation, while others remain buried beneath it? The difference does not lie in what happened to them, but in how they chose to interpret it, and in the inner decision they made immediately after life appeared to destroy their plans. I once studied the story of Viktor Frankl, who survived the unspeakable horrors of the concentration camps. He discovered what he called the last of all human freedoms, the ability to choose our attitude toward any circumstance, no matter how unbearable it may seem. Even when stripped of everything, a human being can still decide the meaning they give to their suffering. Imagine for a moment how your life would change if you began to see your current problems not as punishments, but as initiations, sacred trials that are developing emotional and spiritual muscles you never knew existed. They are shaping a strength, a character, and a depth of soul that comfort could never provide. They are preparing you for a level of consciousness you could not have reached otherwise. But here's something you must understand. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Pain is the natural consequence of loss, but suffering is the choice to keep reliving that pain, replaying the story, and identifying yourself with the wound. What would happen if, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you began to ask, "For what purpose is this happening within me? What lesson is life trying to reveal? What strength is being born through this experience? What part of you is dying so that a greater version of you may rise?" Every crisis you experience is a symbolic death, an alchemical process through which your old identity burns so that the authentic self can emerge purified. I once met a woman during a seminar who was going through one of these symbolic deaths. She had lost her job, her marriage, and her sense of purpose. She told me she felt like an empty vessel, too old to begin again. I told her what I am telling you now. Nothing is ever truly lost. It is simply being transformed. Your life has not ended. It has paused so that your soul can rewrite its design. Within you exists potential that remains dormant until adversity shakes it awake. 6 months later, she had rebuilt her life, discovering gifts she never imagined she possessed. 2 years after that, she was no longer surviving. She was radiantly alive, guided by a sense of purpose that only suffering had been able to awaken. Pause for a moment and repeat this truth. My current situation is not permanent. It is transitional. Everything in existence is transient. The good moments are temporary, and the painful ones are temporary too. The question is not whether life will change. The question is, in what direction will it evolve from here? And that depends entirely on your inner decision, made in this moment of awareness. Now let me share with you what I call the Phoenix Principle. Have you heard of the myth of the phoenix? The sacred bird that when it feels its life cycle has ended, builds its own nest, sets itself on fire, and from its ashes rises renewed, more luminous than before. That myth is not fantasy. It is the symbolic truth of the human psyche. Perhaps you feel like parts of you have died. Perhaps your dreams have turned to ashes. Perhaps the person you used to be no longer exists. And you are right. That former version of you no longer exists. But from those ashes, a truer, wiser, stronger version of your being is waiting to be born. Here lies the essence of Jung's teaching. The phoenix does not mourn its ashes. It does not cling to what it once was. It does not compare itself to those who never had to walk through the fire. The phoenix uses its ashes as sacred material, the foundation for its transformation. It rises, not in spite of the fire, but because of it. And so can you. Are you truly willing to do the same? Are you willing to stop clinging to the version of your life that once was, and begin consciously building what your life can become from this very moment onward? Because let me tell you something that, as Carl Jung would say, defines every genuine transformation of the soul. The most meaningful stories always contain a chapter where everything seems lost. That chapter is not the end. It is the sacred turning point that makes the entire story worth telling. Think about how this applies to your own life right now. From what ashes could you rise again? Which parts of your old identity must die completely so that something new and more authentic can be born. What version of yourself is waiting to emerge through this very experience? Jung taught that in every descent there is a seed of rebirth, and this is where your transformation begins. Now, I want to share with you something I call the law of emotional reversibility. It's one of the most powerful psychological principles that exist, though few people understand it deeply. The law states that if you act as though you already are the person you wish to become, eventually your inner reality will align with that outer action. If you act as though you already possess confidence, confidence will begin to grow within you. If you act as though you are already successful, life will start opening the doors that match that vibration. This is not about pretending. It's about behaving in harmony with the identity of the being you are becoming. Ask yourself, how would a person who has already transcended my current struggle act? What choices would they make each morning? How would they speak to themselves? What would they invest their time and energy in? Imagine how your life would transform if, instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you began asking, "How can this serve my growth?" Instead of wondering, "When will this pain end?" you began asking, "What can I do today to move one step closer to the life I want to create?" I once met a man, let's call him Tom, who lost everything during an economic collapse. For months, he lived in his sister's basement, humiliated and defeated. I asked him, "Tom, how would a successful man of your age, temporarily living in his sister's basement, behave each day?" He got defensive at first, but then he reflected and said, "Well, I suppose he wouldn't stay in pajamas watching TV until noon. He'd probably wake up early, dress as if going to an important meeting, and spend the day searching for opportunities or learning new skills." I told him to start doing exactly that, to wake up at dawn, shower, dress as if he were the CEO of his own personal recovery, and dedicate his days to rebuilding. Within 3 weeks, Tom found part-time work. Within 2 months, he had a full-time job. 6 months later, he had his own apartment, and a year later, he had started his own consulting business. Jung would say that Tom didn't merely change his circumstances, he changed the archetype he was living from. Because your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between what you vividly imagine and what you physically experience. If you consistently act as the person you wish to be, resilient, capable, and determined, your subconscious will begin to organize your entire reality to match that new identity. It will draw opportunities, people, and synchronicities that you couldn't see before. But there's something even deeper that Jung understood. Crises are rarely punishments. They are forms of guidance. What appears as tragedy may actually be a hidden blessing, forcing you to leave a path that no longer served your evolution. Have you ever considered that what you are experiencing right now might be exactly what your soul needs to discover who you truly are and what you're capable of? Maybe the life you had before, as comfortable as it seemed, was keeping you trapped in a false sense of safety, far from your true potential. I once heard the story of a high-level executive who was fired after 20 years in the same company. He felt betrayed and lost. Yet 6 months later, using his experience and knowledge, he built a consulting business that gave him more income, freedom, and purpose than he had ever known. Later he said, "Losing that job was the best thing that ever happened to me, even though at first it felt like the worst." So this week, I want you to practice something. Each morning, before you even rise from bed, ask yourself, How might this situation be serving my evolution? Even if I can't yet see how. You don't need an immediate answer. Simply keep the question open and allow insights to emerge gradually. Now let's talk about something even more crucial. What Jung might call the moment of individuation. The power of the decision point. Every person who has ever changed their destiny has reached a moment where they made an irrevocable decision that things would never be the same again, no matter how long it took, no matter how much effort it required. It's the moment you stop being a victim of circumstance and become the conscious architect of your fate. This moment doesn't arrive when conditions improve. It arrives when you decide they will. It doesn't appear when you have all the answers. It appears when you decide you will find them. It doesn't come when you feel strong. It comes when you decide to create strength from within. So I ask you now, are you ready for this to be your moment? Are you ready to decide that your story doesn't end here? That this chapter, no matter how painful, is not the conclusion, but the beginning of your rebirth? Pause for a moment and think. What would that irreversible decision look like for you today? What promise could you make to yourself right now that would completely alter the trajectory of your life? I'm not talking about vague goals like, I want to be happier. I'm talking about concrete, measurable commitments. For example, I decide that in the next 90 days, I will apply to 5 new opportunities each week until I rebuild my stability. Or I decide to dedicate 1 hour every day for the next 6 months to developing the skill that will open a new path for me. Or I decide to read 1 book on personal transformation each month and apply 1 practical lesson from it to my daily life. The key lies in specificity and unconditional commitment. Not, I'll try, not I'll do my best, but I will do this, no matter what obstacles appear along the way. And remember, as Jung often reminded his students, transformation doesn't happen in giant leaps, but through small, conscious steps repeated every day. This is what I call the technique of daily small steps. When practiced with faith and persistence, it becomes the bridge between who you are now and who you are destined to become. The idea is simple, yet profoundly transformative. Identify the smallest possible action you can take each day that brings you closer to the life you want to create. Then, commit to doing that action every single day without exception, regardless of how you feel. Why does this work? Because as Carl Jung would explain, when the psyche is in crisis, the conscious mind becomes paralyzed by the immensity of change. Yet the unconscious still responds to small, consistent acts of will. We may not be able to transform everything at once, but we can always take 1 small step. And that is where the alchemy begins. Those daily, seemingly insignificant steps generate momentum. Momentum builds confidence. Confidence generates more action, and repeated action produces tangible results. Results awaken hope, and hope becomes the inner fire that inspires even greater transformation. What could be your smallest daily step? Perhaps it's rising 30 minutes earlier to reconnect with your purpose before the noise of the world takes over. Perhaps it's making 1 call each day to someone who might guide you toward a solution. Maybe it's writing a single page in a journal to process your emotions and bring clarity to your thoughts. Or maybe it's walking for 20 minutes to strengthen both your body and your mind. The size of the step is irrelevant. The power lies in consistency. Because once you form the habit of taking daily action toward your recovery, your unconscious mind begins to cooperate with your intention. it starts seeking opportunities, noticing details that once went unseen, and connecting patterns that once seemed random. You begin to attract circumstances, people, and synchronicities aligned with your new direction. Imagine how it would feel to know that every day, no matter how dark or difficult, you have done at least one thing that moves you closer to your rebirth. That sense of daily progress, even if minimal, can mean the difference between sinking into despair or remaining afloat until the tides of life shift in your favor. Reflect on your present life. What is the smallest yet most meaningful action you could take daily for the next 30 days? Write it down. Commit to it fully. Begin today, not tomorrow, not Monday, not when you feel ready. Jung believed that true change begins the moment you act, not the moment you think about acting. There is something else Jung observed in those who managed to rise from seemingly impossible situations. They developed what he might have called strategic optimism. This doesn't mean pretending everything is fine when it isn't. It doesn't mean denying the reality of your struggle. It means choosing, consciously and deliberately, to focus on possibilities rather than limitations, on solutions rather than problems, on the future you can still create rather than the past you can no longer change. Strategic optimism rests on a core belief. No matter how difficult your circumstances are, options always exist. There is always something you can do, some next step you can take. You might not see all the paths right now, and you might not know exactly what to do, but you trust your ability to find the way. Jung taught that the human being is infinitely adaptive and creative when united with the power of their inner self. What if each morning you asked yourself, "What are my options today?" instead of, "Why don't I have any?" How would your energy shift? What hidden possibilities might begin to emerge from beneath the weight of your worries? Jung often spoke of the individual's confrontation with despair as the beginning of transformation. When you feel trapped, it is not the world that confines you. It is your mind's refusal to imagine alternatives. The moment you remember that you do have choices, the prison doors of your psyche begin to open. So take a sheet of paper and write at the top, "My options are." Then, without judgment, list every possibility that comes to mind. Moving to a new place, learning a skill, asking for help, reducing expenses, changing careers, reconnecting with someone from your past. Write them all down. The purpose is not to find the perfect answer, but to remind your unconscious that freedom still exists. Now let me share something Jung would have loved. A simple technique with extraordinary power. The question of transformation. Each time you feel lost, hopeless, or overwhelmed, ask yourself this: what is the best that could come from this situation? This question has a profound psychological effect. It shifts your consciousness from the mode of problem to the mode of possibility. When your mind is trapped in problem mode, it looks for proof that things are bad, impossible, doomed. But when you change the question, your mind starts seeking lessons, opportunities, and potential blessings. This is not about denying pain or pretending life is easy. It's about widening your perception to include the unseen light within darkness. Jung taught that the gold we seek often lies hidden in the shadow. From the most painful experiences can emerge the greatest revelations, but only if you keep your mind open to that sacred possibility. Have you ever thought about this? Perhaps this crisis is forcing you to develop strengths you would have never discovered in comfort. Perhaps it's reconnecting you with parts of yourself you had forgotten existed. Perhaps it's preparing you for an opportunity you cannot yet see, but that is already on its way. Perhaps it's teaching you the lessons you'll need for the next chapter of your life. Practice it this week. Every time you feel yourself sinking into negative thoughts about your situation, pause consciously and ask yourself, what is the best possible outcome that could emerge from this? And then allow your mind to explore that question with genuine curiosity. Carl Jung often reminded us that what we resist the most contains the seed of our transformation. I want to talk to you about something that Jung would have called the power of active presence. One reason why crises drain us emotionally is that our minds tend to dwell in two places that consume our energy: the past, filled with regret, and the future, filled with anxiety. But your real power exists only in the present, in this exact moment, in what you can do right now. Active presence means recognizing that even though you cannot change what has already happened, and even though you cannot control everything that will happen, you can take one specific action in this moment that will improve your situation, even slightly. And that single action creates a ripple effect that influences your future in ways you cannot yet predict. So, what is the most important action you could take right now, today, within the next 2 hours, that could improve your current situation, even a little? I'm not talking about solving all your problems today. I'm talking about taking one step, making a call, writing an email, having a conversation, applying for something, learning something new, organizing something, cleaning something. Any action that makes you feel you're moving forward instead of being stuck. The magic of active presence is that it restores your sense of personal control. When you take action, when you do something constructive, when you move the needle even slightly, your subconscious mind receives a powerful message that you are not a passive victim of circumstances, but an active agent of change in your own life. Imagine how your energy and perspective would change if every single day you took just one specific action that brought you closer to solving one of your current challenges. You don't need to fix everything today. You only need to do something today, and something again tomorrow, and something again the next day. The problems that once felt overwhelming when seen as a whole become manageable when approached one action at a time. Now, before we end, I want to share with you the most important lesson I have learned in my life, the one that has allowed countless people to transform theirs. Your ability to recover, to reinvent yourself, to begin again, has no expiration date. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how long you've been stuck in a difficult situation. It doesn't matter how many times you've failed. Your ability to create a better life remains intact in this very moment. I've seen people start successful projects at 70. I've seen people completely change careers at 55. I've seen people find the love of their lives after devastating divorces at 60. I've seen people discover hidden talents they never knew they had after losing jobs they held for decades. Life doesn't end when something goes wrong. Life merely pauses, reorganizes itself, and then continues, often in a better direction than before. But that only happens if you have the courage to keep writing your story when it seems like the ink has run dry. So here you are, in this exact moment, listening to these words. And I want you to know that the fact you've made it this far, that you've spent these minutes searching for answers, for hope, for tools to improve your situation, tells me something extraordinary about you. You haven't given up. There is still fire within you. There is still fight in your spirit. You still believe, even faintly, that your life can improve. And that small spark of belief is enough to begin your rebirth. Because the most profound transformations rarely begin with noise or certainty. They begin with a silent, intimate, deeply personal decision that things are going to change, that you are going to change, that this is not your final chapter. In the coming days, weeks, and months, there will be moments when you'll feel tempted to give up again. There will be moments when old thoughts of despair will try to return. When that happens, remember this moment. Remember these words. Remember that you have tools, that you have choices, that you have the power to write the next chapters of your story differently. And please, return to this channel often, subscribe, and activate the notification bell. Because my purpose is to continue bringing you the most powerful tools, the most effective strategies, and the most genuine inspiration so that you can reach your highest potential no matter where you are starting from. There are moments in life when you feel different, when something deep within you whispers that you don't quite see the world the way others do. You can't fully explain it, and perhaps you've never been able to. It's not something you chose. It simply is. There's a unique lens through which you perceive reality, one that brings meaning to silence and depth to things that seem mundane to others. While people around you overlook subtle details, you feel them intensely. Silence, for you, speaks louder than noise. You sense when someone is in pain, even if they hide it behind a smile. You feel the sorrow of others, as if it were your own, even when they say nothing at all. You didn't ask to be this way. You've just always been this way. Carl Jung once said that special souls are not born in comfort, but are forged in the silent fire of introspection. And maybe that explains it. Maybe that's why, even as a child, you often felt like you didn't belong, like your soul came from another time, another place entirely. While others ran toward the noise, you turned inward. While the world focused on what was outside, you were busy exploring the universe within. And that, too, came with a cost, a deep, often aching loneliness. Not because you were alone, but because you felt that no one else truly understood the way you feel things, the way you are. But that sensitivity of yours, that emotional depth, that way you connect with life, it isn't a weakness. It's not something to hide or fix. It's a signal, a reminder, a sign that within you lives something extraordinary, a soul. And not just any soul, but a soul that perceives more, that knows without being told. A soul that picks up on invisible frequencies, one that feels what others refuse to acknowledge. You carry an ancient truth inside you, one that you might not yet know how to put into words, but it's there, quietly burning in your chest. If you've ever felt like you're too much for the world, too emotional, too intense, too reflective, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's because the world hasn't yet learned how to hold the depth of souls like yours. But hear this clearly. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are awake. Awake in a world that is still fast asleep. And when a soul awakens, everything around it begins to change, even if it takes time. Having a special soul means everything touches you more deeply, not because you're fragile, but because your sensitivity allows you to see beyond the surface. You don't just notice people's words, you feel their energy, their sadness, their longing. The pain of others doesn't just pass you by, it lives in your heart, as if it were your own. You carry burdens in silence that others are too afraid to name. The world has probably called you too much, told you to toughen up, to stop thinking so much, to stop feeling so deeply. But what they don't understand is that you can't live any other way. And more importantly, you shouldn't. This way of being, this intensity, is not a curse. It's a blessing in disguise. Carl Jung believed that to discover your light, you must face your shadow. And you, with all your depth and complexity, have faced storms within yourself that others can't even begin to comprehend. You've sat in silence, questioning your purpose. You've felt emptiness that clings to your chest. You've asked again and again, what's the point of all this? And still, you're here, searching, asking, feeling. That voice inside you, that's your soul. And not everyone can hear theirs. Many drown it out with noise, with distractions, with pretending. But not you. You've learned to sit in your silence, even when it hurts. You've learned that wounds don't need to be denied. They need to be honored. That pain doesn't take you away from who you are. It returns you to it. Your soul is special because it chose to feel. It chose not to numb itself. It chose to awaken. And yes, that awakening can be painful. It can feel like a lonely road, but it's also sacred. In a world obsessed with escaping inward truths, you chose to go deeper. While others search endlessly for answers in the external world, you closed your eyes and began to ask questions that only the soul can answer. Who am I? What am I here to give? What does it really mean to live authentically? You may not have all the answers yet, but asking those questions, that already sets you apart. It doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're finding your way back to your truth. A special soul isn't defined by what it accomplishes. It's defined by what it transforms. Every time you chose forgiveness over resentment, every time you allowed yourself to cry when the world told you to be strong, every time you opened your heart despite knowing you could get hurt, you were embodying your true power. Your soul doesn't need applause. It doesn't need validation. It vibrates on a different frequency, and though that frequency can sometimes feel isolating, it is never wrong. In fact, it's exactly what this world needs. And even if you've often felt like you don't fit in, the truth is, you're finally beginning to fit into yourself. You weren't born to fit in. You were born to awaken, to transform, to remind others of the parts of themselves they've forgotten. Jung once said, "A life not lived is a disease from which one can die." And you, even if you've hidden, even if you've gone silent at times, know that there's still a life inside you waiting to be lived. A fire that hasn't gone out. A light that, no matter how wounded, refuses to be extinguished. Your soul isn't special just because it feels different. It's special because it carries a mission that often lives beyond words, beyond logic, beyond what the eyes can see. And that mission isn't always grand or loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as choosing love in a moment of anger, as simple as telling the truth when it's easier to stay silent, as beautiful as seeing someone for who they really are when no one else does. Sometimes it's in the most subtle details, in the way you silently accompany someone, in how you listen without judging, in how you hold space for those who have forgotten how to hold themselves, that your true essence shines through. And maybe no one ever applauded you for that. Maybe you've never received recognition, praise, or even a thank you. But your soul doesn't need applause. It doesn't seek validation. It only seeks truth. Because when you have a different kind of soul, you can't follow the paths that others have paved. You grow tired of the noise, of the shallowness, of trying to fit into molds that were never meant for you. You're not drawn to empty gestures or superficial approval. There is something inside of you that has always searched for more, something more authentic, more profound, more deeply your own. And that search hasn't always been easy, because the more awake you become, the more aware you are of how asleep the world really is. You begin to see the contradictions hidden in everyday life, the pain dressed up as success, the fear disguised as ambition, the disconnection passed off as normality. But you can't pretend. You've tried. You've tried to adapt, to fit in, to do what was expected. And yet, something always felt off. There was a silent discomfort, a quiet emptiness, a persistent voice whispering, "This is not your place." That feeling was never a sign of weakness. It was intuition. It was your soul speaking clearly, asking you to return to yourself, to what you truly are, to the part of you that never sold out, that never completely dimmed its light. And there, in the midst of the discomfort, in the space of not knowing, in the feeling of not belonging, your true transformation began. Because special souls are not recognized in easy moments. They are forged in chaos, in doubt, in pain that forces them to look inward. And when you began that inward journey, something changed. You stopped looking for answers outside yourself. You no longer needed others to validate what you felt. You started becoming your own refuge, your own guide, your own steady flame. And in that place, you discovered something powerful. What once hurt you began to open you. What once separated you began to connect you. What once confused you began to reveal truth. Because a soul that has learned to be with itself is a soul no longer afraid of its own light. And that's when everything begins to take on a new meaning. It no longer hurts to be different. You start to honor it. You understand you weren't born to blend in, but to expand. You weren't meant to follow someone else's path, but to carve out your own, to walk where no footsteps existed before. You stop needing to be understood by everyone. Instead, you begin to attract those who can truly see you, not with their eyes, but with their soul. Because real connection isn't based on appearances, but on frequency. And when you elevate yours, everything around you begins to shift. That's one of the greatest gifts of a special soul. It awakens others simply by existing. You don't need to do big, loud things to change the world. Sometimes, just by how you look, how you listen, how you are, you begin to light up places that once only knew shadow. And not everyone can do that. Because to reach that point, you had to fall. You had to break. You had to ask yourself the questions others were too afraid to speak aloud. And you chose not to stay in your wound. You chose to go through it, to turn it into understanding, into compassion, into a strength that doesn't scream, but stands tall. People who have walked through their own personal hell with awareness are the ones who later walk with the greatest humility. They no longer need to prove anything. They no longer impose themselves because they know who they are. And that truth, even when unspoken, is deeply felt. Your soul is special because it doesn't settle for mere survival. It longs to live fully, deeply, truthfully, with purpose. And that's why anything that isn't real feels unbearably heavy now. Empty conversations, forced connections, externally imposed goals. They no longer fit in your journey. Not because you think you're better, but because you've learned to honor your energy. And when you allow yourself to be, without filters, without masks, life begins to respond in a different way. You no longer chase after anything. You no longer try to convince or prove your worth. You begin to attract what vibrates with your essence, and you let go, without fear, of what you once tried so hard to hold on to. Because now you know, nothing real is forced, and nothing meant for you can be lost. At this point in your path, you no longer seek to belong. You seek truth, presence, peace. And in that process, something subtle but profound begins to awaken inside you. You reconcile with your past, not because you deny it, but because you now see it as sacred ground, the terrain that prepared you to awaken. You forgive what once hurt, not by pretending it didn't matter, but by understanding it deeply, by looking through the eyes of compassion. You begin to feel gratitude, not just for the good things, but for what made you stronger, wiser, more human. Your soul is special, truly, profoundly special, because it chose to awaken in a world that often prefers to remain asleep. It didn't settle for the superficial, but was drawn, almost instinctively, to the essential. And yes, perhaps that has made you feel alone many times. But that solitude was never a punishment. It was a preparation. It was a sacred space of silence, so you could finally hear what no one else could teach you, your own voice. Now you understand that everything you felt wasn't an overreaction. It was sensitivity. Your intensity wasn't a burden, it was a compass, guiding you in ways others couldn't see. The way you love, deeply, differently, isn't a flaw. It's precisely the kind of love this world desperately needs. So don't change, don't dim your light, don't hide yourself. This world already has too many copies, but your soul is one of a kind. When the soul truly awakens, it doesn't happen in a burst of fireworks. It's not a sudden flash of enlightenment or a dramatic epiphany. It's a quiet, intimate, almost invisible process on the outside. But inside, it's fiercely transformational. It's as if the broken, forgotten, or dormant pieces of you slowly begin to find each other again, as if something you've been waiting for, maybe even your entire life, finally starts to align. And in that moment, you realize you can no longer live the same way. You can't engage in shallow conversations anymore. You can't stay in jobs that dull your spirit. You can't maintain connections that only survive out of habit. Your soul becomes more selective, not out of arrogance, but from a genuine need to protect its energy. You begin to see that you're not here to be drained. You're here to be expressed, to flourish, deeply, unapologetically. Often, the most special souls are the ones who have endured the greatest trials, not because they deserved it, but because they needed to move through the heaviness in order to remember who they truly are. Some truths only reveal themselves in the dark. Some understandings are born only when the world you once knew collapses, because it's in that moment, when there's nothing left to hold on to, that you finally discover you were what you were looking for all along. Everything you longed for was already within you, waiting patiently to be seen. You begin to see life through new eyes. What once felt like chaos now feels like movement, necessary, purposeful. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. You begin to trust the process, even if you don't fully understand it. You learn to stop chasing after what walks away. You stop begging for what doesn't flow. There's a quiet wisdom within you that starts to guide your steps. And even when certainty is absent, your soul knows. And that's enough. The modern world will often ask you to be logical, productive, predictable. But your soul doesn't move in straight lines or follow clocks. Your soul breathes in cycles. It dances in spirals. It speaks in symbols. And it expresses itself through intuition. When you stop resisting its nature, everything becomes clearer. Not easier, but more real. Over time, you realize that true fulfillment doesn't come from meeting the world's expectations. It comes from being radically true to what your inner self whispers to you in silence. And that whisper, though invisible to others, transforms everything. It changes the way you walk through life, the way you choose, the way you create, the way you love. Your special soul didn't come here to be understood by everyone. It came to remind you that you don't need the world's approval to be wholly, fully yourself. The most powerful transformation of having a special soul isn't what you achieve outwardly, but what begins to unfold inwardly. There comes a moment when you realize that real evolution isn't measured by awards, titles, or recognition, but by how well you learn to be with yourself, how you speak to yourself when no one is listening, how you hold yourself up when no one else is there, how you stay loyal to your truth, even when it means disappointing others. That inner loyalty doesn't arrive overnight. It's born after many mistakes, after countless moments where you betrayed yourself just to be liked, to fit in, to hold on to the little you thought you had. But a special soul can't stay away from itself for too long. It can try. It can distract itself. It can even get completely lost for years. But eventually, the moment comes, the one where you can no longer lie to yourself. And when that moment comes, everything changes. You stop chasing what once obsessed you. You realize that many of your goals weren't really yours, that many of your achievements were just masks, that many of your relationships were false shelters, keeping you from facing yourself. And yes, in the beginning, it hurts. Everything you built on a borrowed identity begins to collapse. You feel empty, disoriented, confused. But within that silent collapse, something ignites, a tiny spark, timid, barely noticeable, but so real that you can't ignore it. It's your soul reminding you who you are. And from there, from that most intimate space, you begin to rebuild. Not like before, not to please, not to impress, but to be fully yourself, with all that entails, your shadows, your light, your contradictions, and your truth. As you continue on this path of returning to yourself, something deep begins to shift in the way you relate to the world. You no longer live with the urgency of being understood. You live with the peace of having understood yourself. And from there, from that inner serenity, you begin to live more authentically. You become more mindful of what you consume, more aware of what you say, more intentional about who you share your energy with. You learn to set boundaries, not out of rejection, but out of self-love. You discover that solitude is not the punishment you once believed it was. It's a sacred space where your soul gains strength, where your creativity blooms, where your intuition sharpens. Because when you learn to be with yourself in stillness, everything changes. You no longer panic about emptiness. You no longer tolerate crumbs disguised as love. You no longer seek external validation to feel worthy. And from this new way of inhabiting yourself, you begin to build a different kind of life. The decisions you make are no longer driven by external pressure, but by an inner compass, quiet, but unmistakably true. You begin to feel what aligns with you and what doesn't. You don't need logical reasons. You feel it in your body, in your energy, in your soul. And while this might make you misunderstood by many, it makes you free. Free from conditioning, free from others' expectations, free to live from a place that is honest and real. And in that state, everything begins to align. Not because life is perfect, but because you no longer need it to be. You've learned that even chaos has its beauty, that even loss brings hidden gifts, and that every experience, even the most painful, is a teacher that brings you back to your center. As you continue moving forward on this path of reconnection, you begin to see, without forcing it, that your priorities change, naturally, authentically, because now your life is no longer shaped by what the world expects from you, but by what your soul is finally, wholeheartedly ready to express. What once felt urgent now fades into the background. The things that used to keep you up at night barely catch your attention anymore. It's not because you've become indifferent or careless. It's because you've come to realize that much of your suffering came from trying to control what was never yours to manage. Now, from a clearer and more conscious place within yourself, you begin to let go. You release the desperate need to have all the answers, to fix everything, to carry burdens that were never truly yours to bear. What starts to emerge is a sense of lightness, not because life weighs less, but because you're no longer trying to hold it all together through fear or the exhausting desire to please others. You begin to trust that everything has its own timing, that things arrive when they're meant to and leave when their purpose has been fulfilled. You stop resisting change. You stop begging for someone's attention. You stop trying to explain the unexplainable, because you finally understood that you don't have to fight for what is already yours by nature, your peace, your truth, your path. And in the midst of this shift, something profound happens. You begin to experience time differently. You're no longer in a rush. You no longer chase after a version of success that never belonged to you. Instead, you find beauty in simplicity, in moments of quiet, in the sacred pauses life offers. What once felt boring now becomes your refuge, and what you once searched for outside, validation, affection, purpose, now begins to emerge from within. Because you've discovered that the more you give to yourself, the less you rely on a world that never truly knew how to give you what you needed. As time passes, this connection to yourself deepens. It becomes evident in everything you do, in the way you speak, the way you walk, the way you truly listen to others. You no longer need to have all the answers. Just being present is enough. Just seeing people for who they truly are, without filters, without judgment. Your authenticity becomes your language, and without even trying, it begins to transform every space you inhabit. You start to notice that your presence has an impact, even when you say very little. Your calmness says more than any speech could ever express, and your ability to truly see another person without labeling them creates a space where others can finally breathe a little easier. But it's not because you see yourself as better. It's because you've been through the darkness. You didn't run from it. You didn't numb yourself. You stayed long enough to understand it, to learn from it, to come back with light. And that is one of the most powerful gifts a special soul can offer. The ability to return from the abyss with a message. Not everyone can do that. Many escape, distract themselves, deny the pain. But you chose to go through it. And because of that, you can now stand beside others without controlling them. You can understand without needing to be right. You can love without needing to own. You can guide without manipulating. Because you learned how to do those things with yourself. And now you have something real to give. You're no longer trying to save everyone. You're no longer desperate to be seen. You simply walk in alignment with what you feel. And that, in itself, is enough. Those who resonate will come closer. Those who don't will continue on their own path. And you'll be at peace with both outcomes. because your goal is no longer to belong, but to be in harmony with yourself. That's when you begin to understand that your sensitivity was never a weakness, it was a misunderstood gift, that your need for depth wasn't a flaw, it was your soul calling out for something more, that your discomfort with superficiality wasn't arrogance, it was a sign that you were born to go beyond what's obvious, beyond what's common, beyond what most people settle for. And no, not everyone will get it. Some will say you're too much, others will think you're making it all up, but you no longer need to explain yourself. You've made peace with being different, and instead of hiding it, now you honor it. Because in your difference lies your essence. In it lives your truth. In it pulses your power. And if all of this has resonated with you, if deep down, something inside you feels that it's no accident you're hearing this, then maybe the time has come. The time to stop hiding who you are. The time to start honoring your sensitivity as a strength. To see your uniqueness not as a burden, but as the gift it truly is. The world doesn't need more masks. It needs awakened souls like yours. So if this message has reached you, if it's reminded you of something your soul already knew, then I invite you to keep walking this path with us. Subscribe to the channel and join us as we continue exploring these sacred spaces where the mind, the soul, and consciousness meet. Have you ever felt that someone appears in your life at the exact right moment, as if destiny had placed them there? It's not a coincidence. Some connections go beyond logic, encounters that seem written into an invisible plan. Carl Jung taught us that our most significant relationships don't arise by chance. There are deep forces at work in our psyche and in the collective unconscious. When the energy of two souls aligns, their paths inevitably attract each other. It's not just about chemistry or superficial compatibility, but about a deeper resonance, where the hidden archetypes within our psyche come into play. Jung spoke of synchronicity, those events that seem random, but actually carry a hidden meaning, a connection that transcends time and space. This attraction between two people doesn't emerge solely from desire or conscious logic, but from something far more powerful, the unconscious. Within each of us exists a hidden world, a space where our shadows dwell, along with our repressed memories and most authentic desires. And when we meet someone who touches the deepest fibers of our being, we feel it instantly. It's as if the soul recognizes something familiar in the other, as if an invisible bridge connects two destinies. It's not just that you feel good around that person, it's that something deep within you tells you there's something to learn from them. They might be a teacher disguised as a lover, a mirror reflecting your own shadows, or even someone who comes to help you heal wounds you didn't even know you had. Jung taught us that the people who enter our lives serve a purpose. Even those who challenge us or hurt us are not there by accident. They represent a part of ourselves that we need to discover or integrate. When you meet someone and feel that immediate connection, you're actually sensing the energy of your own unconscious reflected in them. Many times, what attracts us most about someone isn't their appearance or personality, but the way they awaken hidden aspects within us. That's why some relationships feel inevitable, as if an invisible force is pushing us toward them. Jung would say, this is the psyche seeking wholeness, an attempt of the soul to complete itself through the other. But here lies the true mystery. That same attraction can be a blessing or a warning. Because just as the unconscious guides us toward growth, it can also lead us to repeat destructive patterns. Have you ever wondered why you feel drawn to people who end up hurting you? Why do you fall into the same types of relationships over and over again? Jung would tell us it's not a coincidence, but the result of unresolved wounds seeking to be healed through our relationships. The unconscious projects onto others what we have yet to recognize within ourselves. If you carry within you fear of abandonment, insecurity, or past wounds, you will attract people who reflect those same wounds. Not because destiny is cruel, but because your psyche is trying to heal through repetition. It's as if the universe places a mirror in front of you so that you finally confront what you've been avoiding. But if you're not aware of it, you'll end up trapped in a cycle of pain, not understanding why you keep attracting the same experiences. That's why the deepest relationships don't just bring happiness, they also bring our shadows to light. Jung taught us that true love isn't just a source of pleasure, it's also a path to self-discovery. The people who leave a lasting mark on our lives are those who, in some way, force us to see ourselves with greater clarity. And although the process can be painful, it's also an invaluable opportunity for growth and evolution. Not all the connections we experience are meant to stay. Some enter our lives only to fulfill a specific purpose, to teach us something we need to learn before moving forward. The real question isn't why certain people come and go in your life, but rather, what lesson did they leave within you? When you allow yourself to see your relationships from this perspective, the pain of loss transforms into gratitude and learning. You stop clinging to those who are no longer present and begin to understand that every connection has its own time and meaning. Souls meet when they have something to teach each other. Sometimes the lesson is love. Other times it is detachment. And occasionally it is simply a reminder of who we are at our deepest core. But what is certain is that every encounter leaves an imprint on our psyche, an echo in our unconscious that transforms us in ways we cannot even imagine. When the energy of two souls aligns, no barrier can prevent their connection. But when that energy becomes misaligned, no effort will be enough to keep those people together. Jung teaches us that true harmony is not about forcing things, but about allowing them to flow naturally. If a connection is genuine, it will withstand the test of time and personal growth. But if a relationship starts to feel forced, it is a sign that something has changed, that the paths are beginning to diverge. The biggest mistake we make is holding on to people or relationships that no longer vibrate at our same frequency. We cling out of fear, out of habit, or because we believe we will never find something better. But when you hold on to what no longer belongs to you, you close yourself off to the possibility of something new, something more aligned with your evolution, entering your life. Jung would say that this resistance to change is part of the ego, the part of us that fears the unknown and prefers the familiar, even if the familiar causes us pain. But the truth is that life is always guiding us to where we truly need to be. And when you trust that process, you begin to see that every ending is, in reality, a new beginning. When you allow relationships that have fulfilled their purpose to leave, you create space for new connections to come. Connections that reflect your true self in this moment of your life. True love is not possession or control, but freedom and growth. It is not about finding someone to fill our voids, but about sharing our wholeness with another being. When two souls meet at the right time, their connection transcends logic, time, and space. They do not need explanations or justifications. They simply exist. And when this happens, the energy between them becomes so powerful that their paths are drawn together irresistibly. But for this to happen, you must first do the inner work. You must explore your shadows, heal your wounds, and know yourself on a deep level. Because only when you are truly aware of who you are can you attract people who resonate with your true essence. Jung taught us that the greatest adventure in life is not finding someone else, but finding ourselves. And when we do, the right connections come into our lives naturally, without the need to force them. So the next time you feel that unexplainable connection with someone, pause and reflect. Ask yourself, what is this person showing me about myself? What parts of my unconscious are emerging through this relationship? Is this a connection that nourishes and expands me, or is it a reflection of patterns I need to break? Because in the end, the answer is not outside, but within you. And when you understand this, you begin to see relationships from a new perspective, not as a desperate search for love or companionship, but as a path to self-knowledge and transformation. This is where true power lies, in understanding that every connection is a reflection of our own inner journey. When the energy of two souls aligns, their paths are drawn together irresistibly. But remember, destiny is not an act of chance, but the result of the energy you emit and the awareness you have of yourself. Ultimately, the best way to attract the right love is to become the best version of yourself. When you start working on your inner world, something almost magical happens. The people you once connected with begin to drift away, and those who truly resonate with your new energy start to appear. This is not a coincidence. It is a reflection of your internal transformation. Carl Jung taught us that the human psyche is not just a container for thoughts and memories, but a vibrational field that interacts with reality. What happens in your unconscious mind? Have you ever felt that someone appears in your life at the exact right moment, as if destiny had placed them there? It's not a coincidence. Some connections go beyond logic, encounters that seem written into an invisible plan. Carl Jung taught us that our most significant relationships don't arise by chance. There are deep forces at work in our psyche and in the collective unconscious. When the energy of two souls aligns, their paths inevitably attract each other. It's not just about chemistry or superficial compatibility, but about a deeper resonance, where the hidden archetypes within our psyche come into play. Jung spoke of synchronicity, those events that seem random, but actually carry a hidden meaning, a connection that transcends time and space. This attraction between two people doesn't emerge solely from desire or conscious logic, but from something far more powerful, the unconscious. Within each of us exists a hidden world, a space where our shadows dwell, along with our repressed memories and most authentic desires. And when we meet someone who touches the deepest fibers of our being, we feel it instantly. It's as if the soul recognizes something familiar in the other, as if an invisible bridge connects two destinies. It's not just that you feel good around that person. It's that something deep within you tells you there's something to learn from them. They might be a teacher disguised as a lover, a mirror reflecting your own shadows, or even someone who comes to help you heal wounds you didn't even know you had. Jung taught us that the people who enter our lives serve a purpose. Even those who challenge us or hurt us are not there by accident. They represent a part of ourselves that we need to discover or integrate. When you meet someone and feel that immediate connection, you're actually sensing the energy of your own unconscious reflected in them. Many times, what attracts us most about someone isn't their appearance or personality, but the way they awaken hidden aspects within us. That's why some relationships feel inevitable, as if an invisible force is pushing us toward them. Jung would say, this is the psyche seeking wholeness, an attempt of the soul to complete itself through the other. But here lies the true mystery. That same attraction can be a blessing or a warning. Because just as the unconscious guides us toward growth, it can also lead us to repeat destructive patterns. Have you ever wondered why you feel drawn to people who end up hurting you? Why do you fall into the same types of relationships over and over again? Jung would tell us it's not a coincidence, but the result of unresolved wounds seeking to be healed through our relationships. The unconscious projects onto others what we have yet to recognize within ourselves. If you carry within you fear of abandonment, insecurity, or past wounds, you will attract people who reflect those same wounds. Not because destiny is cruel, but because your psyche is trying to heal through repetition. It's as if the universe places a mirror in front of you so that you finally confront what you've been avoiding. But if you're not aware of it, you'll end up trapped in a cycle of pain, not understanding why you keep attracting the same experiences. That's why the deepest relationships don't just bring happiness, they also bring our shadows to light. Jung taught us that true love isn't just a source of pleasure, it's also a path to self-discovery. The people who leave a lasting mark on our lives are those who, in some way, force us to see ourselves with greater clarity. And although the process can be painful, it's also an invaluable opportunity for growth and evolution. Not all the connections we experience are meant to stay. Some enter our lives only to fulfill a specific purpose, to teach us something we need to learn before moving forward. The real question isn't why certain people come and go in your life, but rather, what lesson did they leave within you? When you allow yourself to see your relationships from this perspective, the pain of loss transforms into gratitude and learning. You stop clinging to those who are no longer present and begin to understand that every connection has its own time and meaning. Souls meet when they have something to teach each other. Sometimes the lesson is love. Other times it is detachment. And occasionally it is simply a reminder of who we are at our deepest core. But what is certain is that every encounter leaves an imprint on our psyche, an echo in our unconscious that transforms us in ways we cannot even imagine. When the energy of two souls aligns, no barrier can prevent their connection. But when that energy becomes misaligned, no effort will be enough to keep those people together. Jung teaches us that true harmony is not about forcing things, but about allowing them to flow naturally. If a connection is genuine, it will withstand the test of time and personal growth. But if a relationship starts to feel forced, it is a sign that something has changed, that the paths are beginning to diverge. The biggest mistake we make is holding on to people or relationships that no longer vibrate at our same frequency. We cling out of fear, out of habit, or because we believe we will never find something better. But when you hold on to what no longer belongs to you, you close yourself off to the possibility of something new, something more aligned with your evolution, entering your life. Jung would say that this resistance to change is part of the ego, the part of us that fears the unknown and prefers the familiar, even if the familiar causes us pain. But the truth is that life is always guiding us to where we truly need to be. And when you trust that process, you begin to see that every ending is, in reality, a new beginning. When you allow relationships that have fulfilled their purpose to leave, you create space for new connections to come. Connections that reflect your true self in this moment of your life. True love is not possession or control, but freedom and growth. It is not about finding someone to fill our voids, but about sharing our wholeness with another being. When two souls meet at the right time, their connection transcends logic, time, and space. They do not need explanations or justifications. They simply exist. And when this happens, the energy between them becomes so powerful that their paths are drawn together irresistibly. But for this to happen, you must first do the inner work. You must explore your shadows, heal your wounds, and know yourself on a deep level. Because only when you are truly aware of who you are can you attract people who resonate with your true essence. Jung taught us that the greatest adventure in life is not finding someone else, but finding ourselves. And when we do, the right connections come into our lives naturally, without the need to force them. So the next time you feel that unexplainable connection with someone, pause and reflect. Ask yourself, what is this person showing me about myself? What parts of my unconscious are emerging through this relationship? Is this a connection that nourishes and expands me, or is it a reflection of patterns I need to break? Because in the end, the answer is not outside, but within you. And when you understand this, you begin to see relationships from a new perspective, not as a desperate search for love or companionship, but as a path to self-knowledge and transformation. This is where true power lies, in understanding that every connection is a reflection of our own inner journey. When the energy of two souls aligns, their paths are drawn together irresistibly. But remember, destiny is not an act of chance, but the result of the energy you emit and the awareness you have of yourself. Ultimately, the best way to attract the right love is to become the best version of yourself. When you start working on your inner world, something almost magical happens. The people you once connected with begin to drift away, and those who truly resonate with your new energy start to appear. This is not a coincidence. It is a reflection of your internal transformation. Carl Jung taught us that the human psyche is not just a container for thoughts and memories, but a vibrational field that interacts with reality. What happens in your unconscious mind is reflected in the world around you. This is why some people seem to find love at the perfect moment, while others remain trapped in cycles of failed relationships. It is not a matter of luck, but of awareness. If you still have unresolved wounds within you, you will attract those who reflect those wounds. If deep inside you believe that love is painful, you will end up in relationships where that belief becomes a reality. Jung would say that it is not fate punishing you, but rather your own unconscious trying to show you what still needs healing. This phenomenon is called projection. What you see in others is actually a reflection of something within you. This is why some people inspire us, while others trigger rejection or even pain, not because they possess something special, but because they awaken parts of our psyche that we have yet to integrate. Jung believed that the unconscious seeks wholeness and does so through relationships. What attracts or repels you the most about someone is, in reality, a message from your soul, a code that reveals what you still need to understand about yourself. Once you grasp this concept, your relationships will change forever. You will no longer feel like a victim of destiny, but will begin to understand that every person who enters your life has a purpose. Some are there to love you, others to challenge you, and others simply to teach you how to let go. But all, without exception, are reflections of your own energy. When you realize this, you stop desperately searching for the right person and start working on becoming the best version of yourself. Because only when you are whole within can you attract someone who resonates with that wholeness. But this path is not easy. Jung warned us that self-knowledge requires courage because it means facing what you have avoided for years. It means looking within and recognizing your fears, your wounds, and your shadows. It means accepting that some relationships didn't work out because deep down, you weren't truly ready for the love you claimed to want. We like to believe that love simply arrives in our lives without effort. But the truth is, love is something we build from within. If your inner world is chaotic, you will attract chaos. If you carry fear within, you will attract relationships filled with insecurity. But if there is peace within you, you will attract relationships that reflect that peace. It is a universal law. So before asking yourself why you haven't found the connection you desire, ask yourself a more important question. Who am I at this moment? Because the kind of love you receive will always be a reflection of the love you have for yourself. If you do not value yourself, you will attract people who do not value you either. If you do not respect yourself, you will attract those who cross your boundaries. But if there is clarity and self-love within you, toxic relationships will simply disappear from your life. Jung taught us that life is not about finding someone else, but about finding ourselves. And once we do, the right relationships come effortlessly, not because we are desperately searching, but because our energy has aligned with true love. When you understand this, the fear of loneliness disappears. You no longer see being single as a failure, but as an opportunity to work on yourself. You no longer cling to relationships that hurt you because you understand that love is not about suffering, but about expansion. And most importantly, you stop looking for someone to complete you because you realize you are already complete. And at that moment, true magic happens. When you stop searching from a place of lack and begin to vibrate in wholeness, the right person enters your life, not because you need them, but because they resonate with the energy you have cultivated. This is why so many people find love when they stop looking for it. It is not a coincidence. It is the law of attraction at its deepest level. Jung said that the most meaningful relationships are those in which two people help each other evolve. It's not about dependence or filling voids, but about sharing a journey of growth. And when two souls who have worked on themselves meet, the bond they create is unbreakable. There is no fear, no manipulation, no games, only authenticity and love in its purest form. But to reach that point, you must first do the inner work. You must heal your wounds, face your shadows, and learn to love yourself as you are. Only then will you be truly ready to receive the love you genuinely deserve. The next time you feel a deep connection with someone, ask yourself, does this person reflect my evolution or my wounds? Is this a relationship based on growth or on repeating old patterns? The answer to these questions will reveal whether that bond is a blessing or a lesson in disguise. Because in the end, destiny is not an inexplicable mystery. It is the consequence of who you are within. And when you transform from within, everything around you begins to change, including and especially the people who enter your life. When two souls on the same vibrational level meet, there is a feeling of familiarity, of home. It is not just physical or emotional attraction. It is something deeper, as if something in the other person awakens a truth that has always been within you. Jung would call it an encounter with the anima, or animus, the aspects of the unconscious that represent the masculine or feminine part within us. Throughout our lives, we cross paths with many people, but only a few leave a real mark. Those few who transform us do not appear by chance. They are a reflection of our evolving psyche. If you are in a period of growth, you will attract someone who propels that evolution. If you still have unresolved fears, you will attract someone who mirrors them. That is why the most intense connections are not always the easiest. Sometimes the person who impacts you the most is not the one who gives you immediate peace, but the one who challenges you, who awakens your insecurities, who forces you to face yourself. These relationships are not always meant to last, but they have a purpose: to make you aware of aspects of yourself that you previously ignored. But here's the problem. Many people mistake these bonds for true love and end up trapped in destructive relationships, believing that suffering is part of the connection. Jung warned that if we are not aware of our shadow, we end up projecting it onto others. In other words, if you have not healed your wounds, you will attract someone who reflects them. And instead of working on yourself, you will get lost in the illusion that the problem is the other person. Have you ever noticed that after leaving a difficult relationship, similar situations repeat themselves with different people? It's because the problem was never the other person. It was the energy you carried within, the unconscious patterns you kept repeating without realizing it. True love, the kind Jung would describe as a connection of souls, does not create unnecessary suffering. It is not about drama or emotional dependence. It is a love where both individuals meet in their best version, without the need for manipulation or power games. However, reaching this kind of connection requires something that many people are unwilling to do: the inner work.